There are no flowers for me, like the variegated coloring of Lisbon on a sunny day.
Cities of Utopia.
These were the words used by the Portuguese author Fernando Pessoa to describe Europe's westernmost capital, a perfect blend of innovation and heritage, business ecosystem and incredible vibrancy. Once the center of a global empire that spanned 4 continents, this city has a flavor all of its own. Dropping into the Tagus River from the top of its 7 hills, Lisbon is not only Portugal's main port, but also its commercial, political, and tourist center. All of this makes it a place of culture and diversity. The Portuguese capital is also famous for its vibrant art scene, with murals and exhibitions all over the city. There's also great food, exceptional nightlife, and award-winning beaches. First, we would like to introduce Professor João Seixas, Pro-Rector of NOVA University Lisbon and responsible for the area of social territorial innovation. Seixas has developed his professional activity in the field of urban studies and has a very diverse experience. He's a professor and a researcher, but he was also a senior consultant for the Euro-backed program of the European Commission. Seixas is also the author of several books about Lisbon, the latest titled Lisbon in Metamorphosis. He's the co-founder of Ler Devagar, a Portuguese expression which means read slowly, an association and bookstore that uses culture to intervene in society. Also, Seixas was a columnist in a national reference newspaper on issues related to cities and territories. Last but not least, he's the author of the podcast Ritmos da Cidade.
What is Lisbon? Lisbon is a city with a vast historical ballast. It is a city of Mediterranean nature, in spite of being in front of the Atlantic. So it has something like in a dual position between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. Lisbon grew through its port and as a place of exchange since the beginning of its times, through wider and longer connections more and more throughout the world, like its Mediterranean counterparts, like Athens, like Rome, like Venice, Barcelona, Marseille, Istanbul, in a matrix that comes from afar, from the Phoenician cities, from Alexandria, from the Roman Empire. Well, Lisbon is the second oldest capital in Europe, and in the 16th century it opened completely to the globe, to Africa, to Brazil, to Asia. And it grew like that through its ports and through the interchanges of commerce and people. In the middle of the 18th century, just a little bit before the big earthquake that almost destroyed the entire city, it would be amongst the 5 most populous cities of Europe. The plan to rebuild the city after the great earthquake of 1755 would be recognized as one of the first world manifestations of the Enlightenment and of the Industrial Revolution that was starting at those times. That is why the scales of Lisbon and its interconnections and exchanges are quite vast today, covering practically the entire planet, especially since the 16th century. It is so, therefore, the existence of Lisbon itself is far beyond the scales of its own city, of its own region, of its own country, and even nation. Lisbon is today a large metropolitan region with around 3 million people, with almost 40% of the national GDP, and with large equipment and structures. It is implanted in an extraordinary and very rich and beautiful territory, which has long transcended its old central core, usually known as the capital city of Portugal. So that is why I usually like to say that Lisbon is a huge city of cities, a beautiful concept suggested by some geographers in the 20th century, and it connects quite well to the Lisbon metropolitan area. However, despite the promotion of important plans and processes of urbanization and improvements, especially in the second half of the 20th century, the city maintains significant challenges for its own development. In fact, in the middle of the 70s, just before the revolution, the democratic revolution, when the NOVA University of Lisbon was being founded at that time, close to a quarter of the population of the metropolitan region of Lisbon lived without adequate conditions of comfort and housing. So the region of the city will witness for the next decades an intense dynamic of urbanization, especially through real estate markets, private and social, supported by municipalities and public investments.
Universities hold a very important role when it comes to understanding and improving cities.
So, to understand the city well, to understand the Lisbon of today, it is necessary to observe the past, the present, which is in movement, and the multiple challenges posed to the city and to its great region. For us to configure a productive, a social and redistributive and circular economy, a cohesive community, and to accessible and qualifying ecological habitats, we have to understand the main challenges that all the cities of Europe have today. Cities are mirrors of ourselves. The city is, therefore, the most complex creation of humanity and the mirror of ourselves, in my view. So we must develop clear visions with consolidated knowledge and science, and with a lot of joint and participatory politics. In my view, therefore, the central and decisive issues for the future of Lisbon, for its region and for the country itself, like what kind of tourism do we want and how much, what new airport and where, what housing policies, what economic and employment opportunities, how to combat the inequalities, what kind of ecological and sustainable policies we have to implement. All these fundamental questions and dilemmas must be analyzed, debated and decided through knowledge, science and new models of development. Views less separated by strict sectorial or corporative logics and too much and excessively dichotomous views. The visions must be therefore much more in terms of their impacts and effects on societies, of communities, on territories, and on the economies. So therefore, it is important to analyze Lisbon and the Lisbon of today and of the future as a laboratory for the future. A new kind of urbanism will be necessary, overcoming old dichotomies, overcoming segmented functionality views, and that is why the role of the universities is so fundamental. That is why the NOVA University stands today as one of these main challenges, and to understand and to accompany the future of Lisbon.
Matilde de Almeida is attending a Master's in Communication at NOVA FCSH, the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. Matilde holds a degree from University of the Algarve in the south of Portugal and is now living in Lisbon, where she discovered a whole new city.
NOVA has established itself as one of the greatest universities in Lisbon, and it has its deserving prestige. One of the things that I found when I arrived in the university is a very strong sense of community, of student community. I think you will find many great opportunities and experiences, not only education-wise, but also with the projects and initiatives that have been started by students' groups, but always supported by the university. There's always space for everybody. And if you have a project or an idea, I think that you will find a lot of support from your teachers, from the academic community itself. And I think that is a very strong suit from the university, especially in times where we are always talking about how students can evolve and start their own projects and have their own ideas to develop yourselves, not only personally, but professionally wise.
But not only. As Matilde highlights, Lisbon can also be a very appealing city for visitors, particularly young people.
Adapting to Lisbon can sometimes be a challenge, especially if you come from a smaller town like I did. Everything can feel very overwhelming at first, but I think that the greatest advice I can give you is to just go easy on it. You see, while it is certainly a challenge in the beginning, I think you will find that it's very easy to blend in with the city life. Lisbon has grown so much in these last few years. It has become so much more dynamic. It's now a melting pot of cultures where there's always something new happening. I think you will find that there's a great work-life balance, something very much valued by younger generations like mine, and probably one of the main reasons Lisbon has become so appealing to students and digital nomads and such. That and the weather and the food. I don't know. There's so many great things to talk about when talking about Lisbon. Personally wise, one of the best things about the city for me is its cultural and social offer, from cinema outdoors to art exhibitions, museums, to a fun nightlife. You will find that there's always something to do. There are always things and plans with your friends. To mention some of my favorite spots, which are the amazing viewpoints that you can find in the middle of the city, and that you can watch amazing sunsets with your friends while looking over the entire city of Lisbon and even the river. These viewpoints like Portas do Sol or São Pedro de Alcântara are just some of them to mention, although you can find many others which are all as equally beautiful.
Thank you for joining us in Lisbon, another stop on our journey across the cities of Utopia. See you next time.